Would you dare move through the streets and alleys of India like this white girl? She is clearly a young Englishwoman, yet she has traveled thousands of miles to this mysterious land of India, and with a local man leading the way, she visits the even more mysterious Marabar Caves. But the timing could not be worse. Just as they arrive at the cave entrance, the guide suddenly needs to use the bathroom, so she can only stand there alone and wait. But women are born with a curious heart. Before her friend returns, she secretly walks into the cave beside her. Inside, it is pitch black. Only by striking a match can she barely make out what the place really looks like. But just then, an evil presence seems to descend upon her. When she hears her friend calling from outside, the woman actually blows out the match, and when she sees someone appear at the cave entrance, it is as if her soul has been pulled out, and her emotions instantly spiral out of control. This is A Passage to India, adapted from the novel of the same name by E.M. Forster. The story takes place in the early 20th century. At that time, India is still a British colony, and Western faces can be seen everywhere in the city. Mrs. Moore has crossed the ocean from England, bringing her future daughter-in-law Adela to this foreign land to visit her son, who works here. Ronnie is the magistrate of the local town, and he is genuinely happy about his fiancée's arrival. So the family takes a carriage back to the apartment. Along the way, the two women chat and laugh, because what lies before them is an entirely new world. But just then, Adela suddenly notices people wrapped in white cloth by the roadside. Confused, the girl asks her fiancé what is going on. From Ronnie, she learns that it is the body of someone who has just died, about to be thrown into the Ganges for a water burial, a common local custom. After that, the family finally arrives at the place where Ronnie lives. Two groups of Indian servants stand to either side, warmly welcoming their newly arrived masters. But this makes the old lady very uncomfortable, because she has never experienced such class privilege back in England. At the same time, a high-ranking British couple has also come to India. Facing the crowded market streets, the car driven by the official and his wife does not slow down at all. At the critical moment, it nearly crashes into two cyclists ahead. Even though the two are thrown badly to the ground, the couple disappears from sight without even saying sorry. The man who was nearly hit during the day is named Aziz. He is an Indian Muslim and a well-known local doctor, but when others mention when he will remarry, it seems to touch a sensitive nerve, because Aziz's wife passed away a year ago. Later, during dinner, a friend hands him a letter sent by a British major in the area, but the letter does not say what the matter is. It only urges Aziz to come over immediately. Yet when the man arrives at the residence, he learns from the servant that the major left half an hour ago without leaving even a message. Then the major's wife walks out as well. She ignores the Indian man completely, but shows great interest in Aziz's carriage. She calls to her female companion inside, and the two of them simply get into his carriage, seemingly in a rush to attend a nearby dance. Without asking, they drive away the doctor's carriage, not even bothering to greet him. Aziz is clearly already used to this kind of attitude from white people, so he has no choice but to walk home alone. As he passes a mosque, he goes inside to rest for a moment, admiring the beautiful architectural details within. He imagines that one day, he might also build a mosque of his own. But just then, a strange gust of wind suddenly blows behind him. At first, Aziz does not pay attention, but when he turns around a second time, he actually sees a woman in white standing not far away, in the middle of the night. This is truly frightening, and once Aziz confirms that she is a living person, he immediately flies into anger, because this is a Muslim holy place, and shoes must be taken off before entering. But as he speaks, the old lady has already removed her shoes. Aziz feels extremely embarrassed, quickly apologizes to her, and asks whether she needs him to call a carriage. He also says there are many birds and wild animals nearby, and tells her to be careful. This old lady is devout and kind, and introduces herself as Mrs. Moore, who has just arrived from England to visit her son Ronnie, a magistrate here. But Aziz complains to Mrs. Moore about those arrogant and rude English ladies who drove off in his carriage as if it were only natural. Mrs. Moore listens patiently the whole time and does not defend her own countrywomen. Aziz is deeply moved and cannot help saying that the old lady understands him, understands other people's feelings, and that it would be wonderful if everyone were like her. And so Mrs. Moore becomes the first English person Aziz has truly connected with. From this chance meeting onward, his attitude toward white people gradually begins to change. The man then warmly escorts Mrs. Moore back home. Faced with such sincere and honest behavior, Mrs. Moore is also left with a deep impression. The next morning, the British tax collector hosts a party. He not only invites the British, but also sends invitations to the wealthy and socially respected Indians in town. The purpose is to increase mutual understanding between the British and Indians. At the party, the Indians all appear restrained, while the British chat and laugh with ease. To show off the status of white people, the tax collector's wife even speaks about Indian women's clothing in a contemptuous tone. But Mrs. Moore is the complete opposite. She warmly greets every local girl she meets. Because of this, Ronnie gets into an argument with his mother. Mrs. Moore is also angry. She feels the British are far too arrogant and rude toward Indians. Ronnie becomes unhappy the moment he hears this and restates his official position as a representative of British colonial authority. He believes he did not come here to behave politely and gracefully, but to administer justice and maintain order. He also believes his mother must not betray the class to which they belong. But Mrs. Moore does not see it that way. Just as the two are trapped in this awkward conversation, the British national anthem begins playing at the party, and mother and son stand up. Yet Mrs. Moore still helplessly reminds her son that God wants human beings to help and love one another, and she tells Ronnie he must remember that. Elsewhere at the party, Adela meets an English bachelor named Richard, the principal of a local government school, but he is an odd one among the colonizers. At school, he works hard to treat all students equally. In society, he also tries to speak to everyone on equal footing, so he is different from the other colonizers. Richard has many Indian friends, so the man offers to introduce Adela and Mrs. Moore to a few Indian friends. Among them is the Doctor Aziz, whom Mrs. Moore met earlier. Soon, the appointed time arrives. The doctor is the first to reach Richard's home. He carefully looks around everywhere. After all, being invited into a white person's home is not common. Richard, who has just finished bathing, says while getting dressed that his collar stud is broken. Aziz immediately gives him his own collar stud, saying he has extras. In truth, this doctor has a kind heart, and for now, he is very willing to make more English friends. Soon after, Mrs. Moore and Adela also arrive. Because he has dealt with the old lady before, Aziz appears very relaxed. He talks endlessly about many things, about the Mughal dynasty in Indian history, and about surgical operations he has performed. Adela beside him is curious about every single thing he says. She wants to ask for his home address, hoping to see what a real Indian home looks like. When Aziz hears this from Adela, he instantly panics, because his home is extremely shabby, nothing more than a dark little room filled with black flies. He never expected Adela to take his polite words seriously, so he quickly changes the subject and invites the three English friends present to visit a scenic site 20 miles away. That place is the Marabar Caves. Also present is a mysterious Hindu believer, Richard's assistant. He describes some details about the Marabar Caves, but Mrs. Moore seems to sense an irresistible force in this man and becomes unconsciously absorbed in it. So, to escape her own wandering thoughts, she asks Richard to show her around the school. This leaves the other three by the pool, cooling off and chatting, but unexpectedly, Ronnie suddenly barges in at this moment. When he sees his fiancée with Indians, his barely hidden anger is written all over his face.
What happened to Fielding? Where's my mother? And what on earth are you doing?
Well, they're seeing the college and we're eating water chestnuts.
His posture as a British official truly embarrasses his fiancée. After that, Ronnie drives the carriage and prepares to take the two women away, but a passing train blocks their path. While waiting, Ronnie accuses Indians of being dirty and lazy, and even criticizes Aziz for having no collar stud on his shirt and paying no attention to detail. Ronnie's behavior completely angers Adela and also makes the old lady uncomfortable. Mrs. Moore does not even attend the polo match afterward. After the young couple calms down, Adela has a private talk with Ronnie. She then says she does not want to get married and does not want to stay in India, since her fiancé's so-called objective attitude toward Indians has already wounded Adela's kind heart. They can only return home in low spirits for now, but unexpectedly, just as the family is about to enjoy dinner, Ronnie sees that his mother is still angry about what happened during the day, and he seems to have thought things through. He begins to stop obsessing over contact with Indians and sincerely apologizes to his mother, but the old lady still believes he is only changing on the surface, because her son's bureaucracy has already taken deep root in his heart. At the same time, Adela beside them also appears very calm. Just like that, time moves to the next morning, and the somewhat depressed woman decides to ride a bicycle out for a trip. She follows the dusty path as it winds forward, but before she knows it, she has reached the wilderness 12 miles away. As the road continues, the ruins of an ancient temple gradually come into view. The temple walls are covered with vines, weeds grow between the cracks in the stone, and part of the walls have already collapsed, revealing the damaged structure inside. Yet one can still see its once grand scale and exquisite carving. With curiosity and awe, she walks into the ruins. In the corners of the temple and among the broken walls, many statues of different forms are scattered. Some of the statues wear mysterious smiles. Some show distinctive postures. Time has left mottled marks on them, yet their spirit remains, as if they are telling ancient stories. Adela's gaze is firmly drawn to these statues, but just then, a group of monkeys suddenly bursts out from somewhere. They leap up and down along the temple walls and tree branches, making sharp cries that shatter the original quiet. Some monkeys even bare their teeth at Adela. Some climb down along the vines, instantly throwing Adela, who has stopped there, into panic. So she hurriedly turns around, gets on her bicycle, and flees the place as fast as she can. When the frightened woman returns home, Ronnie happens to see her waiting at the door. The man steps forward with some concern and asks what happened, but unexpectedly, Adela's attitude is completely different from before. As if something in her heart has been shaken, she takes the initiative to suggest reconciling with her fiancé. Soon, the day arrives for the trip to the Marabar scenic area. Adela brings Mrs. Moore and meets Aziz, who has been waiting at the station for a long time. Because the journey is not short, they still need to take a train. Aziz has also spent a large amount of money preparing the entire outing for everyone. Even so, he is still very happy. He feels it is his good fortune to have met English people without prejudice. But before the train departs, something still goes wrong. Richard arrives later than the agreed time and is blocked outside by the lowered road barrier, so he can only watch Aziz and the others leave. But he promises he will use another way to meet everyone at the scenic area as soon as possible. However, the fact that he misses this trip is entirely caused on purpose by Richard's assistant, because this believer seems to have sensed something and believes today is not a suitable day for travel. Time moves to the next morning. The train passes through dense woods, making the women who have just woken up look outside. But just as Adela is enjoying the beautiful natural scenery, a shout interrupts her thoughts. It turns out Aziz, who was assigned to another carriage, has actually climbed out, and the woman thinks this is far too dangerous, but he does not care at all and even makes confident gestures, telling Adela not to worry about him. He has no idea the woman has already been badly frightened. Mrs. Moore notices her uneasy expression and tries to ask what happened. Before Adela can explain, Aziz pops up outside the window and gives the old lady a serious fright as well. They finally reach their destination, and Aziz arranges for the two ladies to ride an elephant there. This game of riding elephants is an entertainment item specially arranged for tourists. Aziz believes they will enjoy it, but this is not the real India Mrs. Moore wants to experience. This misunderstanding also lowers the old lady's mood. At the same time, the most important point is that Aziz himself is not familiar with the caves, yet he still has to act as their guide. As a result, once everyone enters, Mrs. Moore has only visited the first cave before the foul smell and roaring echo inside make her dizzy and disoriented.
Kawadol!
A mysterious force leaves Mrs. Moore deeply uneasy. It is just like the Hindu believer she met before, able to pull at her soul in an instant. So the old lady can only quickly escape this dangerous place. But even after leaving the cave, the glaring sunlight still leaves her unsettled. She wants to calm down in the rest area, but when she puts on her sunglasses, she discovers that what she sees is a full moon. The moon here may symbolize a kind of calm and detached existence. It seems to suggest that after Mrs. Moore experiences a chaotic spiritual shock, she seeks comfort and peace in something natural, distant, and tranquil. This also reflects her desire to temporarily withdraw from the chaotic human world and her own spiritual crisis. After that, Adela and the others also come out. Seeing Mrs. Moore looking so uncomfortable, Adela asks what happened to her. Mrs. Moore only uses her old age and unsuitability for long journeys as an excuse to decline the chance to visit the next cave. For this, she also apologizes to Aziz. If everyone were like the two of them, putting aside racial ideas and treating one another equally, perhaps there would be no opposition in the world, let alone war. But reality is often very different from ideals. Afterward, Aziz takes Adela and a tour guide to continue the next part of the journey. They leave Mrs. Moore alone in the rest area, but just as they are about to climb toward the next cave, The altitude leaves the exhausted Adela needing a brief rest. She takes off her hat and tries to wipe away her sweat with her hand, then smears the sweat onto the back of her hand. In Aziz's eyes, these actions run against the restrained image of traditional Indian women, but under these special circumstances, Aziz perhaps sets aside social conventions and takes the initiative to offer her a helping hand. An Indian man holding a white woman's hand is something rarely seen at the time, and it leads Adela to say something inappropriate. She asks Aziz how many wives he has. Aziz immediately feels insulted, because a well-educated Indian Muslim like him would never practice polygamy. He feels a little irritated, so before reaching the nearby cave entrance, he wants to find a place to calm down and asks Adela to wait where she is. But unexpectedly, after Aziz finishes smoking at another cave entrance, he discovers the waiting woman has disappeared. There are more than a dozen caves in the area. Where has she gone? Even the guide beside him has not noticed. What he does not know is that Adela is experiencing something she has never felt before. Inside, everything is pitch black. Even after striking a match, she still cannot see the truth of the place. But outside, her companion is calling her name, and this makes Adela's mind completely detach.
Miss Weston? Miss Weston?
Meanwhile, Mrs. Moore, who is resting, hears the sound of water nearby, and as if she has some kind of premonition, she can sense that something has happened to Adela, and her premonition happens to match reality. The woman runs madly out of the cave, and thorny vines cut her body as she flees. But right now, she can no longer care about any of that. Aziz, who knows nothing, is still searching everywhere, and fortunately, he sees Adela stop a car at the foot of the hill. But what exactly happened in the cave, and why Adela left without saying goodbye, leaves Aziz completely confused. At the same time, the delayed Mr. Richard also arrives. After he meets up with Mrs. Moore, the planned trip can only be put aside for now, and the car that picked up Adela seems to belong to Mrs. Calendar, Richard's friend. What they do not know is that Adela is currently suffering terrible torment. Her body is covered with cuts, but more importantly, her mind has suffered a massive trauma, and she can only rely on sedatives to ease the collapse she cannot suppress. On the other side, because something unexpected has happened during the trip, Mr. Richard, who has just arrived at the destination, can only return home first by train with Aziz. But who would have thought that just as they are about to enter town, a group of police officers is waiting at the station, claiming Aziz has broken the law.
What on earth are you talking about?
Sir, I'm instructed not to say.
Don't answer me like that. Produce your warrant.
Sir, excuse me. No warrant is required under these particular circumstances.
Don't show some ridiculous mistake.
Then the anxious Doctor Aziz, under the eyes of many of his own countrymen, is inexplicably escorted into a prison carriage. Mrs. Moore also witnesses all of this, only muttering again and again that something terrible is going to happen. As Aziz's only white friend, Richard keeps asking around inside the judicial offices, but he never expects that Adela has accused Aziz of assaulting her in the cave. This shocking news makes Richard refuse to believe it on the spot, because he knows Aziz's character and believes he would never do something so vile. But for now, the poor doctor has already been thrown into jail, and his fate has suddenly become uncertain. As the incident continues to spread, the Indians of the entire city seize this chance to form a united front in defense of one of their own. They not only march and gather in the streets during the day, but even at night, the whole street is filled with people. They shout for the white people to be driven out, while also treating Aziz as a national hero. On the other side, the British community also gathers to discuss countermeasures. The executive officer even asks every English person to carry a gun whenever they go out, to avoid being harmed by Indians. At the same time, Adela's fiancé Ronnie also arrives at the scene. He tells everyone that Adela is in good physical condition and that there is no need to worry too much. After hearing Ronnie's report, the executive officer gives a few more instructions.
I was about to add that there's a certain member here present who's known to be in contact with the prisoner's defense. I'd like to say one can't run with the hare and hunt with the hounds. At least not in this country.
This is clearly aimed at Richard, because among this group of people, only he is close to Aziz. Even so, he still maintains a fair and rational attitude, believing in Aziz's character. He believes Aziz cannot be declared guilty based only on Adela's accusation. He tries to mediate between the British and the Indians, working hard to build a bridge of communication, but his strength is relatively weak, and in the larger environment, he appears isolated and helpless. Late at night in the Fielding apartment, the light in Mrs. Moore's room remains on. Because of this, Ronnie is very worried about his mother's health. It turns out that after the cave incident, her inner world has been deeply shaken. The cave produced a feeling of emptiness and chaos. This feeling makes her feel powerless about everything around her, including the matter of seeking justice for Aziz. At the same time, she is exhausted by India's environment and its complicated situation. She wants to return to the familiar world of England and find peace within herself. So Ronnie sends his mother onto the train overnight. This is also to prevent his mother from defending Aziz at the future trial. But after Ronnie leaves, as Mrs. Moore painfully recalls her experiences in India, a familiar and eerie atmosphere sweeps toward her. She cannot help looking out through the window and sees, on the dark street, a man making a namaste gesture toward her. This surprises Mrs. Moore, and she cannot help opening the window to look more carefully. By now, the man has raised the namaste above his head, the most respectful gesture of ancient India, and this man is the Hindu believer she once met briefly before. How could he know that Mrs. Moore is leaving India? The mystery behind this is difficult to guess, but the occurrence of anything is both inevitable and accidental. After boarding the ferry, Mrs. Moore feels much lighter. From time to time, she looks up at the stars in the night sky, trying to make herself feel more at ease. But just then, an unprecedented pain suddenly erupts through her body. Mrs. Moore endures the pain and makes her way to a nearby deck chair, and in that moment, her life reaches its end. Perhaps the Hindu believer had sensed Mrs. Moore's future and deliberately gave her a devout namaste blessing at the moment of parting. By the next morning, the crew carefully wraps her body and slowly lowers her into the Indian Ocean. Just like that, Mrs. Moore's turbulent passage to India comes to an end. It also seems to suggest the collapse of a certain ideal connection between the two countries she represents. On the other side, today is also the day of Aziz's hearing, as the accuser, Adela, who has not appeared for a long time, follows the executive officer's car to the courthouse. Along the way, Indian citizens surge in crowds, and unprecedented pressure is shaking the woman's heart. Someone even dresses as a clown specifically to frighten Adela. The noisy and grief-stricken emotions of the crowd turn into a powerful force of resistance, standing in sharp contrast to the statue of Queen Victoria nearby. As the car keeps moving forward, they soon arrive at the courthouse entrance. A debate about racial prejudice begins here. At the same time, the suspect, Doctor Aziz, is also escorted to the scene. In the upper gallery sits a crowd of Indians, while below are the British, marked by status. On the surface, they are here to defend equal rights for both sides, but in reality, they have bought off an Indian judge, attempting to make the trial lean more toward the white side. As Adela and the others enter, the woman tries to look toward Aziz in the defendant's seat, but the hatred in the man's eyes seems as if it wants to tear her apart, making the lying woman unable to look straight at him. Then the interrogation officially begins. The prosecutor first stands up and delivers an impassioned statement. He emphasizes Britain's ruling order in India and declares that British dignity must not be violated. He portrays Adela as an innocent victim. In this barbaric land of India, he says, she has suffered unimaginable harm. He accuses the defendant Aziz of committing an unforgivable assault against an English woman from the civilized world inside the Marabar Caves. He says she suffered a terrible fright in the cave and endured serious physical and psychological trauma. He claims Aziz's behavior not only violated basic moral principles, but also challenged the authority of the British Empire's rule in India. Such absurd words make the Indian audience burst into laughter. After the judge restores order, the defense lawyer begins to refute him. He wants to call Mrs. Moore, who was also on the trip, to testify about what kind of person Aziz really is. Unfortunately, she has already been sent away by Ronnie.
She was smuggled out of the country because she was on our side. She would have proved his innocence.
Could have called her yourself. Neither side called her, neither may quote her as evidence.
But she was kept from us. This is English justice. This is your British Raj. If the point is of any interest, my mother should be reaching Aden at noon today, their time.
Banished by you? Please, please, this is no way to defend your case.
I'm not defending her case. And you are not trying one.
One of the defense lawyers, overcome with emotion, goes directly outside the courtroom and stirs up the passion of the people waiting there. urging everyone to chant Mrs. Moore's name together, but at this moment, no one knows that Mrs. Moore passed away 2 days ago. Now everything depends on how Adela will send a good man into a bottomless abyss. Under everyone's gaze, she slowly walks to the witness stand. All she needs to do is nod and identify Aziz as the man who assaulted her, and the trial will be settled. But from the moment she entered the courtroom, Adela has been watching one person, an Indian man responsible for pulling the cloth fan. In this unbearably hot courtroom, he pulls the rope with elegant, rhythmic movements, while he himself receives not even the slightest breeze. The book writes that this man is like God, a machine that draws the soul. Adela watches him and suddenly feels called by a mysterious force, and all her chaotic hallucinations fade away in an instant. So when the prosecutor asks her to describe what happened in the cave, the situation changes completely.
I'm not quite sure.
I beg your pardon. You are in the cave, and the prisoner followed you.
No. Doctor Aziz never followed me into the cave.
Adela admits that she made a mistake, and that Doctor Aziz did not follow her into the cave. In the end, Adela withdraws the accusation. The white people at the scene are in an uproar, while the Indians erupt in cheers. Aziz is saved in only 3 days. It is as if he has walked through hell. Soon, the news spreads outside. The Indian onlookers can no longer hold back their excitement. They wildly open the barricades and rush straight toward the courtroom. Adela, however, has become a traitor to the British, and no one is willing to offer her help anymore. But having broken through the cage of self-restraint, Adela now feels physically light. Just then, dark clouds suddenly gather in the sky, clearly signaling that rain is coming. Adela looks up at the glass above her as the muddy stains are slowly washed clean by the rain, as if her own soul has also been redeemed. At the same time, as a large crowd of Indians rushes into the courtroom, they lift the wronged Dr. Aziz high above them, celebrating his final clearing of name. He is even carried outside, feeling the cheers and joy brought by everyone around him, because this event stands as a symbol of victory, representing their stronger faith in resisting oppression under colonial rule. But Adela has offended both sides and is now completely isolated. Even her fiancé Ronnie shows no pity for her when he leaves. Clearly, he has abandoned her completely. As Adela leaves the courthouse, she happens to run into Richard. The man asks in confusion why she did what she did, but Adela now seems like a lost and empty shell, unwilling to discuss anything and not knowing where she should go, because in this lonely country, no one is willing to believe her anymore. Fortunately, she meets the kind Richard. Although the two are not close, he is willing to help this poor woman, so they get into a carriage and return to Richard's school. But as soon as they arrive home, there is a letter on the table. After the man reads its contents, displeasure appears on his face. It is tragic news. Richard then hands the letter to Adela. It turns out Mrs. Moore died 3 days ago. For a moment, Adela cannot believe it. A powerful wave of guilt and self-blame rises in her heart, and her sense of loneliness and confusion grows even heavier. At the same time, Richard's assistant arrives and tells them even worse news. Because Adela has withdrawn the case, the lawyers have sent word demanding that the prosecution pay Aziz 20,000 rupees in compensation for emotional damage. Faced with such an enormous amount of money, how could the helpless Adela possibly afford it? So, to ease the growing conflict between the two sides, Richard acts as a middleman and goes to Aziz's home, trying to persuade him not to pursue the compensation. But toward Richard's visit, Aziz seems to have lost the smile he once had. The two used to be good friends, but after everything that happened, their relationship has quietly grown distant. Richard tells Aziz that Adela will return to England in 2 days, and that he himself will resign as principal and leave India, where he has lived for almost 10 years. But unexpectedly, after this incident, Aziz will also look for a place outside British rule and begin his life again. It seems all memories will become the past as each of them leaves in his own direction. After struggling for a while, Richard finally raises the difficult matter he has been avoiding. Aziz has already guessed it. He wants him to give up the 20,000 rupees in compensation. Aziz believes that if he agrees, the British will only say this Indian almost behaved like a gentleman. Too bad the color of his face was wrong. He feels that in the end, the British will always stand together, so he angrily says he wants nothing more to do with them. Just then, someone brings word that the crowd celebrating Aziz's victory has arrived outside. This is a moment of glory to be enjoyed once in a lifetime. Even though his relationship with Richard has broken down, Aziz still wants to invite him to join, but Richard declines. The balance he has tried to maintain between the two nations can no longer face this former Indian friend with sincere feeling, and Aziz, receiving the cheers outside, is also moved to tears, because he feels he once gave Richard his whole heart, even giving him a collar stud. Yet when he suffered a terrible injustice, Richard did not actively stand up and speak for him. The feeling between the two men is like the rain falling once again, leaving only chaos and a cold reality. Just like that, 2 years pass in the blink of an eye. Richard returns once again to the land of India and specially drives out to visit his old friend Aziz. Only this time, he brings a woman with him. It turns out she is Mrs. Moore's daughter, now Richard's wife, and the bond between the two of them was brought about with Adela's help. After briefly stopping near the Himalayas, the couple continues driving toward the place where Aziz lives. Then they follow the Ganges downstream. The scenery here is truly mesmerizing, a rare and wonderful place for seclusion. Soon after, they meet two children, because Richard arranged for his former assistant to find out where Aziz lived and also sent a letter in advance announcing his visit. Aziz deliberately sends his children to meet them. Soon, after passing through a wall on the water, they see several houses built along the shore. Aziz is watching from a distance, his heart filled with mixed emotions. He does not know how to face this former friend, nor whether their broken friendship can ever be healed. But since Richard has come all this way to visit him, it means he has come with sincerity. Still, what happened 2 years ago is something Aziz cannot let go. What is more, in letters sent before, Richard said he was married, and Aziz believed he had married the enemy he once resented, which he could not accept at the time. But it turns out this is a surprise Richard wants to give him. Richard tells him that the woman he married is Mrs. Moore's daughter, and that this match was arranged through Adela's help. Hearing this news, Aziz is instantly left speechless. It turns out he has been wrong about Richard all along. Richard's wife has not come with him because she is pregnant. On top of the exhausting journey, she is resting for now at a nearby inn. Tomorrow morning, Richard will bring his wife with him to visit. When Aziz learns that these English people are all seeking reconciliation, he is also touched. But the person Aziz misses most of all is still Mrs. Moore. At night, during the annual Lantern Festival, Aziz, whose heart has finally opened, writes a letter to Adela far away in England. This is the first time since the cave incident that he opens his heart to Adela. He finally understands the courage it took for Adela to withdraw the accusation back then, and it is precisely because of Adela that he can now live happily here with his children, instead of being locked away in prison. At the same time, at noon the next day, Aziz says a deep farewell to his sincere English friend and to Mrs. Moore's daughter. Perhaps they will never meet again, but that unforgettable memory will be impossible for either side to forget. At this point, the film comes to an end. A Passage to India is Forster's most celebrated work and is widely recognized as a 20th century classic. In 1984, the famous director David Lean brought it to the screen. Whether in the original novel or the adapted film, the work deeply presents the tense relationship between Britain and India in the early 20th century. It explores in depth whether individuals from different cultural backgrounds can build sincere friendship in a social environment filled with prejudice. In terms of literary technique, the novel is built on realism while also making extensive use of symbolism, revealing a strong modernist style. At the beginning of A Passage to India, Forster leads us into his Indian journey with a sentence that seems plain and ordinary. Forster writes that Chandrapur, an Indian city set on the banks of the Ganges, has no notable sites or historic ruins to speak of except the Marabar Caves 20 miles away. This seemingly simple description not only slowly opens the curtain on the entire novel, but also cleverly plants the seed of suspense. The Marabar Caves incident can be called the climax of the novel. It is also the key turning point that changes the beliefs, views, and fates of the main characters. This event not only contains deep social meaning, but also carries a clear supernatural quality. In this chapter, Forster gives the Marabar Caves and their echo-rich and profound meaning. The caves are extremely similar in form. Inside them, there are no carvings or decorations, not even things like beehives or bats, making it difficult to tell one cave from another. Everything in the world turns into an unreal echo inside the caves, appearing in ever-changing forms. From a psychoanalytic perspective, the caves symbolize the unconscious on two levels. On one hand, they represent all that is repressed in personal life. On the other, they represent the prehistoric remnants within modern human beings, those traces from before humanity itself. what Freud referred to as elements of the ID. It comes from a dark and distant prehistoric age, a time and environment that erased all differences, and those very differences are the foundation on which British India built its culture and empire. That is precisely why the sound feels so terrifying. For people raised under a system of repression, lowering their guard before the primitive force of the unconscious is almost the same as abandoning all culture and returning to some primal state. Alright, the above is only my personal understanding of the film and the book. I am a movie lover. See you in the next episode.